15-year-old daughter of a Vatican worker who vanished more than 3 decades ago.
For centuries, the Vatican has maintained a tradition of silence about its inner workings. At first, people believed this was simply the Church's way of maintaining its holiness and authority. But now, the truth has come to light, as Elon Musk has uncovered proof that this silence was just a cover for a far darker side that the world was never meant to see. From involvement in shady financial dealings to bizarre ritual practices, join us as we reveal 15 secrets the Vatican doesn't want you to know. The Gospel of Satan. Hidden deep in the vaults of the Vatican archives is a book that only a few have dared to open. This ancient manuscript, known as the Grand Grimoire or the Gospel of Satan, is no ordinary book. Written in the 16th century, the author, Honorius of Thebes, was rumored to have been possessed by Satan when he wrote the book. Legends claim that as he penned the pages, his eyes were black as coal and evil forces had completely taken over his soul. The Gospel of Satan is filled with horrifying spells on how to summon and make deals with demons and Lucifer, talk to spirits, make oneself invisible and win lotteries. The most terrifying ritual detailed in its pages is called the Triangle of Pacts, where the summoner creates a triangle using specific items like candles and a rare stone called ematil. Now, this triangle is meant to protect the summoner from the demons they'll summon. But it is said even the smallest mistake can cause the demon to break free and drag the summoner's soul to hell. But this didn't stop people from practicing it. If you think this is spooky, wait till you hear what's next. The Judgment of the Dead. In January 897, a time when the Church was in serious chaos because of the selfish hunger for political power, one of the strangest and most horrifying events in Church history happened, called the Cadaver Synod. It was an ecclesiastical trial conducted by the Basilica of St. John Lateran, and it was targeted at Pope Formosus by Pope Stephen VI. During his time, Pope Formosus was a corrupt leader, but when he was alive, the Church turned a blind eye to it. It wasn't until after his death that Pope Stephen VI decided to reopen old wounds and, in a move that shocked the Church Council, asked that he be tried, even though he was already dead. On orders of Pope Stephen VI, Formosus's corpse was exhumed, clothed in his papal robes, and set on a throne in the courtroom. To make it even stranger, they had a deacon speak for the dead pope, as if he were defending himself. The whole thing was absurd because, of course, Formosus couldn't actually respond. But that didn't stop Pope Stephen VI from finding him guilty. All of Formosus's decisions as pope were declared invalid, and as punishment, they stripped his body of its robes, cut off the 3 fingers from his right hand that were used for blessings, and, to make sure he was forgotten, threw his body into the Tiber River. Rwandan genocide. You won't believe this, but the Catholic Church played a huge role in the tragic events of the Rwandan genocide, one of the worst massacres in history. At that time, the Church had a lot of influence in Rwanda, with nearly 90% of the population identifying as Catholic. So it was normal for people to trust the Church to protect them from evil. But instead of protection, the resident priests and nuns either handed them over to the killers, did nothing to stop the violence, urged the Hutu militia to attack, or even encouraged their followers to kill the Tutsis. The most haunting account was when 5,000 people who had taken refuge in a church were brutally murdered after being turned over to the killers. In the aftermath of this terrible event, the Church faced severe backlash from the general public. In the end, the Vatican stepped in, offered apologies, and even tried to erase traces of the information. But by then, it was too late. Prophecy of Fatima. We've all heard of the famous prophecy of Fatima, which took place in 1917, when 3 young shepherd children, Lucia Santos, Jacinta Marto, and Francisco Marto, reported receiving messages from the Virgin Mary. These messages included 3 secrets meant to be revealed later. The first 2 secrets were made public shortly after. The first was a terrifying vision of hell, where the children saw souls suffering in flames, while the second predicted the future, the outbreaks of both World War I and World War II, and included a request from the Virgin Mary for the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart, warning that failure to heed this request would lead to Russia spreading its errors across the world, resulting in wars and widespread persecution of the Church. But the third secret stayed a mystery for many years and was only released in 2000, even though Sister Lucia had instructed them to release it in 1960. When the secret was finally made public, the Vatican shared a vision of a bishop in white who was shot and fell to the ground, which many interpreted to mean the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II in 1981. But people are not satisfied, as they believe the released version is just a part of the whole revelation, with the second half deliberately withheld by the Vatican because it contains further scary warnings about the future of the Church and the world. The next revelation will leave you doubting everything you've ever known. Pope Joan. This might sound unbelievable, but do you know that the Vatican was once ruled by a female pope named Joan? The story goes that Joan was a brilliant young woman with an insatiable thirst for knowledge from Germany, who fell in love with a monk. But, since women weren't allowed to become monks, she decided to disguise herself as a man so she could be with him. She took the name John Anglicus and traveled to Athens, where she studied hard and became very knowledgeable in theology and philosophy. Because of her high intellect, she was noticed by the Romans and was eventually invited over, where she was conferred prominent positions. Surprisingly, after the death of Pope Leo IV, she was elected as pope and took the name John VIII. She ruled for about 2.5 years, from 855 to 858, and during that time, she was known for being wise and fair. Sadly, her cover was blown during a big procession when Joan suddenly went into labor in front of a huge crowd. Some versions of the story say she was killed by an angry mob who felt betrayed by her deceit, while others say she died during childbirth. But that's not all. After her death, subsequent popes avoided the street she gave birth to, and to completely erase her existence from history, the papacy removed her name from the official list of popes, and a special ritual was performed to make sure that all future popes would be men. In the 1500s, there was even a bust of Joan displayed at Siena Cathedral, but after protests, it was quietly taken down in 1600s. Since then, the Vatican has denied any knowledge of her. Inquisition. Imagine being locked away in a dark, freezing cell for months, not knowing if you'd ever be free again. This was the terrifying reality for thousands during the Inquisition. This was a time when the Catholic Church hunted down anyone they believed was against their faith. Everything about this practice was cruel. The accused were denied fair trials and weren't even allowed to have anyone defend them. Inquisitors relied on rumors and accusations, often from jealous neighbors or personal enemies, to convict their victims. And then there was the emotional torture that drove many mad. But the worst part was the physical torture. Stripped nearly naked, prisoners were dragged into dark chambers where their hands were tied behind their backs, hoisted them into the air, and then dropped them violently, dislocating their shoulders. Sometimes, the rack was used to stretch the prisoners' bodies until their muscles tore and bones cracked, leaving the survivors crippled for life. If that wasn't enough, they'd use the water cure, a form of torture where the victim was tied down, a cloth shoved into their mouth, and water poured down their throat until they felt like they were drowning. The sensation was so terrifying that many confessed to anything just to make it stop. And yet, when questioned about these horrors, the Church would downplay the brutality, insisting it wasn't as bad as people claimed. To this day, the Church's secret archives hide detailed records of these tortures, buried deep where no one can see. The Nazi collaboration. Newly discovered Vatican documents have revealed a surprising connection between Pope Pius XII and Adolf Hitler during World War II. Shortly after Pius XII became Pope, Hitler sent a special messenger, Prince Philip von Hessen, to secretly negotiate with the Vatican and try to form an alliance with them. But what's even more shocking is what these documents reveal about the years after the war. In this document, it was revealed that some members of the Vatican were deeply involved in helping high-ranking Nazi leaders escape justice. To ensure the mission was kept under wraps, they used secret routes called rat lines and the services of Bishop Alois Hudal, who created fake identity papers, forging travel documents, and planning secret travel routes to aid their escape from Europe. No thanks to these efforts, notorious Nazis like Adolf Eichmann, who played a major role in organizing the Holocaust, and Josef Mengele, the brutal doctor at Auschwitz, were able to escape without being caught. As terrible as this sounds, it's nothing compared to the next cover-up attempt by the Vatican. Death of Pope John Paul I. Pope John Paul I, born Albino Luciani, became Pope on August 26, 1978, after the death of Pope Paul VI. He was known for being kind and humble, and many hoped he would make important changes in the Church, especially around its finances and moral issues. But tragically, just 33 days later, he was found dead. The Vatican said he died of a heart attack. At first, his death seemed natural, but people started getting suspicious when the Vatican gave different stories about how his body was found. At first, they claimed that a male secretary had discovered him, but later said that it was the nuns who had seen him. On top of that, the Vatican decided not to do an autopsy, which was unusual, especially for someone who died so suddenly. What made matters more suspicious was that before his death, the Pope was planning to fix serious financial problems in the Church that involved powerful people. So, in a bid to prevent him from exposing the Church's dirty secret, they murdered him. The Vatican Bank. Seeing the part the Church played in the Holocaust, investigators decided to dig further. It turns out that the relationship between the Vatican and the Nazis didn't stop at helping the Nazis' former war leaders escape. It went much deeper than anyone could have imagined. According to historian Gerald Posner, the Nazis paid huge sums of money to the Vatican bancas, part of a special church tax known as Kirchensteuer. In just 1 year, this tax was worth approximately $1.7 billion, and all payments were made to the Vatican Bank, which was at the time one of the safest places to hide large sums without raising any dust. But what was discovered next was nauseating. Besides hiding this blood money, the Vatican went as far as investing in Italian insurance companies that held life insurance policies for Jewish families. That way, they were able to profit from the life insurance without paying any insurance claims. Vatican leaks. In 2012, the Vatican was hit by a huge scandal, spearheaded by an Italian journalist named Gianluigi Nussi, who had somehow gained access to some confidential papers, including letters from Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, that exposed serious financial misconduct and shady Vatican contracts. Things got worse when Nussi published a book called His Holiness, The Secret Papers of Benedict XVI, which contained private letters between Pope Benedict XVI and his top advisors. It exposed a Vatican filled with jealousy, backstabbing, and fierce power struggles. It showed that even at the highest levels, people were fighting against each other, trying to control decisions and influence within the Church. As the situation worsened, Pope Benedict XVI ordered a group of cardinals to investigate. What they found was even more alarming. With this new revelation, the Vatican immediately went into panic mode. Fearing that more devastating secrets would be exposed, they launched a swift cover-up and buried available evidence. That is why you don't hear anything about it, except for hushed whispers. It gets worse. Child abuse. Over the years, countless allegations have surfaced about the sexual abuse of minors by priests and other church officials. Reports suggest that thousands of children were abused within the church, with many cases either going unreported or being poorly handled. For decades, rather than reporting these cases to the authorities, the Church dealt with them internally. Dealing with it internally meant that the abuser would be transferred to another parish without informing the new congregations of their history, allowing the cycle of abuse to continue unchecked. Exorcism. One of the most mysterious and secretive practices in the Vatican is the ritual of exorcism. Exorcism is a core aspect of Catholic tradition, involving a formal ceremony known as the rite of exorcism. During this intense process, exorcists recite specific prayers, read passages from the Bible, and use holy water, invoking the name of Jesus Christ to command demons to leave the afflicted person's body. But what the Church often doesn't disclose is how traumatizing the ritual is. Due to how intense it gets, some people, instead of feeling better, come out of it worse than they formerly were. We're talking about heightened anxiety, distress, or even new psychological scars, which has made many question why this ritual is still in practice, especially since the cons almost outweighs the pros. Vatican Secret Court. The so-called Vatican Secret Court is actually the Apostolic Penitentiary, a mysterious tribunal that dates back to 1179. For centuries, it was largely unknown to the public, and it wasn't until 2009 that people started learning about its existence. This tribunal is responsible for handling some of the Church's most serious spiritual offenses, like apostasy, heresy, schism, and certain severe sexual sins. Instead of punishing sins as traditional courts would, the tribunal forgives sins. But here's the catch. The Pope is the only one to grant this forgiveness. Everything about this tribunal is super secret. Cases brought before them are kept completely confidential, and the details are never made public. But once the Pope makes a decision, it's final, and there's no chance of appealing. This secrecy has led many to wonder if there are other sinister crimes requiring severe legal action that the papacy, through this court, has helped cover up, just like they have done with the archive. The Vatican Secret Archives. The Vatican Secret Archives are a massive collection of historical documents maintained by the Vatican. These archives hold records dating back to the 8th century, including letters, papal decrees, official reports, and other significant materials that showcase the history of the Catholic Church and its impact on global events. With an estimated 85 million documents, the archives cover a wide range of topics, such as diplomacy, church administration, and the history of various popes. This extensive collection provides a unique insight into the Church's role throughout history. But access to these archives is highly restricted. While they are not completely off-limits, researchers must go through a strict application process to gain entry. Even then, not all documents are available for public viewing, while some are only released after 75 years to protect sensitive information. Illuminati involvement. Theories suggesting a link between the Vatican and the Illuminati have surfaced due to a mix of historical events, secrecy, and the Church's influence in global affairs. From its creation, the goal of the Illuminati was to create a society based on reason and moral equality, without religion. But after it had gained popularity and attracted members from various influential circles, including the Freemasons, it was suppressed by the Bavarian government in the late 1780s. Since then, their operations have been carried out in secret, but no one would have thought that the Church had a deep connection with them. From the use of similar symbols and rituals to the suppression of certain texts, like the Gnostic Gospels, many believe that the Vatican has adopted elements of Illuminati to maintain its power and influence over the masses, and that the secret archives, hidden chambers, and centuries-old manuscripts are evidence of its alignment with the Illuminati goals. With these revelations, do you think the Vatican is really a religious institution? Or is it a secret cult disguised as Christianity? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. Also, click on the next video on your screen. You'll love it.